Thank you for tuning in. And another article I came across today was this one, a look at Idaho's Black history and future. Reason being is because I know a lot of Black people are tired of being around a lot of violence. And so we're looking for alternatives because I always get asked what's wrong with the Black community or what's wrong with the Black man. And I don't have an answer for that because one, I don't think that I could speak for the entire community or for a Black man because I'm a I'm a Black woman. But if I had to do the research on it and come up with some type of theory behind it, I do have one. I just want to say, it seems like Black men are kind of in a what you would call an antebellum era, and that's like a fancy way of saying slavery era. If you think about it, during the slavery days, Black men had to be very violent and kind of like a buffoon towards Black women. That was just to keep that mind control, that apex type of tactics or whatever you want to call it. But it seems like we have too many Black men that are still in that era, and we have a lot of Black men that feel like they're above Black women because they have a male proudness about themselves. Um, But so I basically want to read this article right here. It says a look at Idaho's Black history and future, because I know some Black people, I have noticed that if we move from around each other, that could be a good way of perhaps, kind of getting away from the violence. But the word, or scholars are saying that wherever there are Black people is very, very violent, and they say it's because it's just the trauma that we've experienced being this color, the hatred towards us, because we can't change. I'm a Black woman. I cannot change my gender, and I cannot change my color. And so there's people that hate for that, and I think that would be the one thing I want to say about Black men. I don't think they know it, but they are like a hate group against Black women, and unfortunately they get rewarded for that greatly in society. But it doesn't mean that they supposed to take it on as holding a gun to their head. What it does symbolize is that Black men definitely behave as if it's easier to hurt Black women than to help Black women, if that makes sense. And this article kind of says that, so I'm just going to read it real quick. Here it goes. It says, as Black History Month, so this article was this year, but for Black History Month, so I just wanted to look back at one of them for some odd reason, and this is why. So it says, as Black History Month comes to a close, we're going to take a look at Black history, Idahos. And it says, Idaho has always had a very small population of Black Americans, but those who have chosen to settle in the Gem State have their own stories to tell. A brief history of Idaho's Black population. Idaho's Black population took off in the 20th century due in part to rising violence and racism in the South and a need for workers during World War II. As white men were enlisting in the military, women and Black men were filling the labor gap left behind. The story of Idaho is similar to Polk Catello specifically. We had a naval ordnance plant that was recalibrating naval guns that brought in a lot of African American workers. The outreach historian for the Idaho State Historic Preservation Office is working to document and register places in Idaho that are integral to the state's Black history. The office received a grant from the National Park Service to find and write the underrepresented stories of civil rights in Idaho. Work on the railroad also attract black people to Boise and Pocatello, which have since had the largest and most concentrated population of African Americans in Idaho. In the 20s, Pocatello had the largest per capita black population in the state, which was a whopping 2.4%, so a very small population overall. 100 years later, and still Idaho's small black community primarily resides in the same two cities, and for decades those populations were concentrated into neighborhoods: the Triangle District in Pocatello and Everstreet neighborhood in Boise, where authorities push vice industries, according to Eberhard. Now it says gambling, prostitution, liquor. These were the neighborhoods where those operations were allowed to grow. They were not discouraged as they would have been in predominantly white neighborhoods, because the powers that be believed the citizens were less valuable. So why not have these vice industries there as well? But now the job opportunities of all the industries are open to black Idahoans, and Idaho State University continues to draw black people from all around the world to Little Patago. So I just wanted to stop right there. This kind of goes into some Africans that's at the school. This is like the first church that they had there that was a black owned in the 1920s and is still there. But the biggest part of this was, I believe that a lot of these professional athletes, celebrities, black celebrities, and sometimes even the politicians, the black politicians, almost you could say black people of higher economical status, we can almost say that they are a part of this right here, this paragraph highlighted. And that's the reason to the breakdown of the black community and what's causing, as a byproduct, the drugs and the mental health issues. So it's almost like saying just because someone gives you a razor doesn't mean you should go play with it, if that makes sense. So it's not as if these, officers are putting a gun to these fellas' head and making them become a menace to society. However, a lot of black men, when they finally, after they do all these years and years and years, they finally start telling the truth and say that they were just trying to be big and bad, and they was making up stories, and white people ain't never do nothing to them. And they be trying to come across like, hey, we got to be big and bad and all this stuff because the white man this and the white man don't want to give us anything. And they just doing and saying that just to be bad and just make it like, to play on people sympathy in so many words. And it's terrible for them to do those kind of things. And I just want to say that we need to just decrease crime and get out of this type of mentality, because it's just not what we need to be at right now, ever. So I have a little clip to play, and it's about 3 minutes. It just says what I just read. I think reading it and then hearing it twice kind of helps to process it. So here we go.
As Black History Month comes to a close this evening, we're taking a look back at Idaho's Black history. Idaho has always had a very small population of black people, but those who have chosen to settle in the Gem State have stories to tell. That's what Dan Everhart with the Idaho State Historic Preservation Office is doing. With the help of the community, he's finding places all around the state with ties to Idaho's black history, like the Bethel Missionary Baptist Church in Pocatello, founded in 1920 when Idaho saw a migration of black Americans from the South looking for jobs left behind by soldiers in World War II.
The story in Idaho is similar. In Pocatello specifically, we had a naval ordnance plant which was recalibrating naval guns that brought in a lot of African American workers.
Black people found work mostly in Pocatello and Boise, the two cities with the historically largest black population in the state.
By 1920, Pocatello had the largest per capita population, black population in the state, which was a whopping 2.4%. So a very small population overall.
For decades, Everhart says those populations were concentrated into neighborhoods where authorities pushed vice industries.
So gambling, prostitution, liquor, these were the neighborhoods where those operations were allowed to grow. They were not discouraged as they would have been in a predominantly white neighborhood. And that was because the powers that be believed that those neighborhoods were less valuable, the citizens there were less valuable. So why not have these vice industries in those communities as well?
But now job opportunities of all kinds are open to black Idahoans, and Idaho State University continues to draw black people from all over the world. Like Daniel Appa, born and raised in Ghana, Appa chose Pocatello to start his career.
Everybody had their own business. My dad had his own business, my mom, her own business, my uncles. So growing up, I never got used to or was interested in working for anybody.
And a far cry from the vice industries black people had been pushed towards, Appa owns his own business, helping adults with developmental disabilities live independently. But Appa is one of the few people he knows from his country that came to ISU and chose to stay.
I know friends of mine who own businesses. We're all here for school. They moved back and they have businesses out there, but it's just because they wanted to go back to family.
Also settling in Pocatello is Dr. Raphael Njoku, who heads the Global Studies Department at ISU. Hailing from Nigeria, Njoku teaches students about African politics and history, enlightening them to the world beyond Idaho's borders.
I strongly believe that diversity is the spice of life. When you have people from different parts of the world bringing ideas, because ideas are bullets. Once fired, they help in building society. So you bring different ideas and unleash your creativity. This town, this state will be a far much better place and happier place than currently.
Anyone with a person, place, or story about Black history in Idaho to share can fill out a form from the State Historic Preservation Office. You can find that on our website at news3now.com.
Thank you for tuning in. Today's cover story is about 18 former NBA players arrested in a fraud scheme. It's a healthcare scheme. And so there's a news clip that I'll play, but before I do that, I wanted to actually read the article that's coming out of NBCnews.com. It says federal prosecutors, and let me blow up the screen a little bit bigger. Federal prosecutors have charged 18 former NBA players with conspiracy to defraud the league's health and wellness benefit program out of $4 million. Defendant Terrence Williams, the 11th overall pick in the 2009 draft by the then NBA Nets and one-time shooting guard for the Houston Rockets, is also charged with alleged identity theft. The defendants allegedly conspired to commit healthcare fraud and wire fraud by submitting claims for reimbursement for medical and dental expenses that were never actually rendered. The U.S. Attorney Office for the Southern District of New York says the defendants, who also include guard Sebastian Telfair, small forward Tony Allen, and power forward Ronald Glenn Big Baby Davis, submitted claims for $3.9 million, from which they allegedly received approximately $2.5 million in fraudulent payments. If the facts alleged in the indictment are true, this team of co-conspirators was certainly not the 96 Chicago Bulls 72-10 of criminals. The defendant looked a lot more like the 2012 Charlotte Bobcats 7-59, or perhaps the Washington Generals. As conspiracies go, these teammates belong on the JV squad bench. Williams allegedly orchestrated the scheme and then recruited other players by supplying them with fake invoices to support their fraudulent claims in their exchange for kickbacks to him once they received payments. Federal prosecutors say at least 10 conspirators paid kickbacks to Williams, totaling approximately almost a quarter of a million. However, when Christopher Douglas Roberts, also known to the basketball fans as Supreme Bay, didn't pay his kickback, Williams took to impersonating the health plan administrator to intimidate him. Williams is accused of creating a phony email from an administrator and falsely raising a potential issue with Douglas Roberts' reimbursement in efforts to frighten him into paying his kickback. In other words, Williams is accused of creating a false email to falsely raise false problems with Douglas Roberts' already false claims. Advancing digital communications have streamlined our lives. Instead of licking stamps and mailing envelopes at the post office, we now email them as PDF. Instead of meeting in person or calling someone, we text message or email them. Everyone's job has been made easier by digital communication, including that of FBI agents and federal prosecutors. Had the former NBA player made any effort to communicate offline, the government would have had a harder time tracking down any evidence. Instead, prosecutors allegedly possess email evidence of false forms and claims. That violates one of the fundamental rules of conspiracies. Don't put it in writing. Meet face to face in the alley. Use smoke signals. Learn semaphore. But email, that's not only putting damning evidence in writing, but it also preserving that evidence on servers out of your control. Lo and behold, some of the most damning evidence the indictment offers is the defendant's emailing of these alleged fraudulent emails to one another, with what appears to be instructions in how to use the forms to defraud. It probably took FBI computers experts less than 24 seconds shot clock to connect these emails to particular defendants. It only made it easier for investigators that some defendants seem to be particularly careless in covering their tracks. Invoices indicated that one defendant received IV sedation, endodontic treatment, for example, root canal, and crowns on 8 teeth at a Beverly Hills dental office for almost $50,000. There's just one problem. U.S. Customs records indicate that the same defendant was in Taiwan on that same day, half a way around the world from Beverly Hills, world-class dentistry. The indictment suggests Williams also broke another bedrock rule of conspiracies. If you and your teammates are defrauding others, don't start defrauding your teammates. That's not a good team ship, is it? The indictment also hints that the government successfully put a full court press on everyone else involved with the scheme who wasn't ultimately indicted. There are plenty of references to folks like the unnamed CC1 and 2 who allegedly assist Williams in creating fabricated chiropractic invoices. Probably the reason CC1 and 2 and others were not named as defendant is that the government got to them and they were willing to turn on their co-conspirators. No surprise there. The government would, of course, be willing to go easy on nobody in order to score convictions against NBA marquee names. The indictment suggests that this scheme was so bubbling that the healthcare plan board of trustees was on the criminal game plan before law enforcement even got involved. The broad likely the board likely handed most of its investigation over to the government. That, combined with the trail of digital evidence these defendants allegedly left in their wake, make the government proven it case seem like, wait for it, a slam dunk.
Players arrested and charged in an alleged healthcare scam. They're accused of defrauding the NBA's health and welfare benefit plan out of $4 million. NBC News correspondent for investigations Tom Winter is here with us. All right, Tom, an NBA champ and Stephon Marbury's cousin are among the people arrested here. Tell us more about who was involved and what they allegedly did here.
Well, first off, if you had told somebody back when Sebastian Telfair was tearing it up in New York City high school athletics that he'd one day be known as Stephon Marbury's cousin, I think people would have been shocked. But yes, that is what happened with his professional career. So that's what we refer to Stephon. To Sebastian Telfair.
Even more shocking, though, is this case he's involved with.
More shocking is this case. So look, it boils down to this. What these players decided to do is come up with a scheme where they would essentially say, we're not going to have medical procedures done, but we're going to send a notice to the NBA's health and wellness program, and we're going to say, look, we had these procedures done, we had to pay out of pocket, so can you guys reimburse us? Can you send us that? And they would put together these fake invoices, which were apparently not on letterhead, had poor grammar according to the indictment, and were for procedures that occurred while some of them were playing basketball in Taiwan, while yet they were supposedly having a medical procedure in the United States. A number of the players actually came together here and said, we had root canals on the same day with the same teeth. It just got to a point where anybody looking at this could say, you know what, there's probably a problem here.
Yeah.
There's probably some fraud here. The NBA actually tried to claw back some of the money from the players, and some of the players actually did pay them back at different points. At the end of the day, we've got 18 NBA players, former NBA players, right now facing federal charges.
I don't mean to laugh here because obviously the charges, they're federal, it's serious, but I mean, when you talk about a bunch of guys getting together with mistakes, sloppy letterhead, all saying we're having a root canal, I mean, it just seems like a poorly hatched scheme. But they were charged with conspiracy to commit healthcare and wire fraud. Those are big charges. What kind of trouble could they be in here? And aside from the really sloppy handwriting and all of those mistakes, how did authorities get tipped off that this was going on?
Well, we asked U.S. Attorney Audrey Strauss, her last press conference with us, of course, she took over for fired U.S. Attorney Jeff Berman. She is actually going to be leaving that office shortly for the Biden administration's new handpicked choice. We asked her about that. She did not go into how this investigation came about. She did say that it's ongoing. Terrence Williams, one of the players that's charged here, is accused of being the person who, in their words, quote, orchestrated this. He received kickbacks from 10 players. So they would get the money from the NBA, and then in return for those fake invoices, they would send Williams some money as well. But when you look at the totality of the case here and the evidence that they have so far, at least what they've presented in the indictment, it appears to be pretty strong that they had these schemes going along. There are also a couple unindicted co-conspirators that are listed in here, not by name. So it'll be interesting to see where this investigation goes from here. Perhaps it expands.
All right, Tom, thanks so much. Always great to have you on set. I think you're setting the record here. You're the lead